Good morning. We're going to go ahead and start now. This is 140-160 class. We're going to review a few briefs that we learned earlier this week, and they are phrases. First of all, we are dealing with phrases and words that begin with the word best, and we went over these. I'll quickly re-identify the outlines. Best of my ability, B-I-B-L-T. Best of my knowledge, B-I-J. Best of my recollection, B-I-R-K. Best of your ability, B-U-R-B-L-T. Best of your knowledge, B-U-R-J. And best of your recollection, B-U-R-K. And some sentences. Ready? To the best of your recollection, tell me how the accident happened. To the best of my ability, I will tell you why I can't work now. To the best of your knowledge, tell us what you heard the defendant say. To the best of my recollection, he told me to sit down or he would kill me. To the best of your recollection, describe your assailant to us. To the best of my knowledge, the man was about 6 feet tall. Tell me, to the best of your ability, how the accident happened. To the best of my recollection, the green car went through the red light and hit my car on the driver's side. Tell us, to the best of your knowledge, how you were hurt. I will do that to the best of my ability. All you can do is tell us to the best of your recollection. To the best of my knowledge, there were no other cars involved. And again, there were a couple other briefs in there that you should probably be using. Accident happened, S-D-A-P-D. Defendant, D final F-T. Driver's side, that's possessive, driver's side. D-R-D-Z, come back for the A-O-E. And red light, R final L-T. All of these briefs that I give you are with STINED theory. Okay, let's try these sentences one more time. To the best of my knowledge, there were no other cars involved. All you can do is tell us to the best of your recollection. I will do that to the best of my ability. Tell us, to the best of your knowledge, how you were hurt. To the best of my recollection, the green car went through the red light and hit my car on the driver's side. Tell me, to the best of the to the best of your ability, how the accident happened. To the best of my knowledge, the man was about 6 feet tall. To the best of your recollection, describe your assailant to us. To the best of my recollection, he told me to sit down or he would kill me. To the best of your knowledge, tell us what you heard the defendant say. To the best of my ability, I will tell you why I can't work now. To the best of your ability, tell me how the accident happened. Okay, now we also went over some briefs utilizing the beginning word how. So these are phrases. And we'll go over the outlines. And then also there's a few other briefs within these sentences we'll go over. After the accident, A-E-F-R-X. A-E-F-R-X, after the accident. Courtroom, K-R-A-O-M, courtroom. Did you remember? D-U-R-M. Did you remember? Have you been? V-U-B, have you been? Before, B, final F-R. Lawsuit, L-A-U-T. Lawyer, L-A-U-R. money, M-U-N, mother and father, M-A-F-R, mother and father. Received, S-E-F, come back T, received. And now the how phrases. So we have how about, H-O-U-B-T. How can, H-O-U-K. How could, H-O-U-K-D. How late, H-O-U-L-T. How fast, H-O-U-F-Z. How many days, H-O-U-M-D-Z. How many days? How much, H-O-U-C-H. How much? How often, H-O-U-F-N. How often? How many times, H-O-U-M-T-S. How many times? How was, H-O-U-F-S. How was? How were, H-O-U-R-P. How were? How old, H-O-U-L-D. How old? How many, H-O-U-M. How many? How should, H-O-U-S-H-D. How should? How shall, H-O-U-S-H. How shall? However, we have options here, H-O-U asterisk F-R or just H-O-U-F-R. However, that's one word. However, two words, H-O-U come back asterisk F-R or H-O-U come back final F-R. Two words, however. How in the world, H-O-U-N-T, come back for world. How large, H-O-U-R-J. How large, how long, H-O-U-N-G. How long? Okay, I'm going to dictate the phrases before we do the sentences now. How long? How large? However? How in the world? However? How should? How shall? How many? How old? How were? How was? How many times? How often? How much? How many days? How fast? How late? How could? How can? How about? And now the sentences. How can you say that about her? How late will you be tomorrow? How many days until our next meeting? How often do you get to school on time? How was the dinner last evening? How old are your mother and father? How should I spell your name? However, I will be bringing a lawsuit. How in the world does she write that fast? How long were you in the courtroom with your lawyer? How about turning the matter over to the court? How could you do that in school? How fast were you driving yesterday? How much did you spend at the mall? How many times did you write your drills? How were you feeling after the accident? How many accidents have you been in before? How shall I teach you to write? How ever did you remember all that? How large is the sum of money she received? Okay, that's it for the briefs for this week. I'll do another sheet at the beginning of next week. Let's go ahead and start with some literary dictation now. And this is actually from your EV 360 assignment for week 3. So it's a preview. Okay, so I will be dictating in segments. We'll do one, repeat it a little bit faster, and work our way up, beginning at 140 on the record. I walk to my car because work is finally over. It's late, and I am ready to go home. I start the engine, turn on the radio, take a deep breath. This will be a long drive home. As I was getting on the freeway, I realized it would be an even longer drive home than I thought. Apparently, I cut someone off because I was honked at several times. I was afraid because this person tailgated me until I was almost home. In this case of road rage, I was lucky. I wasn't hurt, and my car was not damaged. Other people have not been so lucky. Every time someone gets into a car and ventures onto city streets, they run the risk of encountering road rage. Sometimes they will become the victim of senseless acts of violence, and sometimes they will be the aggressor. Every 13 minutes, one person dies in a motor vehicle crash. Okay, that was 140. Now we're going to bump it up and then add to it. Ready? I walk to my car because work is finally over. It's late and I'm ready to go home. I start the engine, turn on the radio, and take a deep breath. This will be a long drive home. As I was getting on the freeway, I realized it would be an even longer drive home than I thought. Apparently, I cut someone off because I was honked at several times. I was afraid because this person tailgated me until I was almost home. In this case of road rage, I was lucky. I wasn't hurt and my car was not damaged. Other people have not been so lucky. Every time someone gets into a car and ventures onto city streets, they run the risk of encountering road rage. Sometimes they will become the victim of senseless acts of violence, and sometimes they will be the aggressor. Every 13 minutes, one person dies in a motor vehicle crash. The main cause of road rage is a sense of uncontrollable anger or violence in the driver. Many times, this violence has been present in the person since childhood. Much of this violence can be traced back to acts of violence seen on television as a child. It is hard to believe, but road rage and television violence have many similarities. The violence on television is capable of persuading a variety of people to do unthinkable things. For instance, the government should require all new television sets to include the V-chip. The V-chip is an electronic means of screening out content, particularly violence, that the parents deem inappropriate for their children's viewing. If this law is passed, it could significantly reduce the number of road rage incidents in this country because people would not be as prone to committing violent acts. They would think twice about acting on their anger because they would not have violent thoughts instilled by television in their minds. Road rage will be reduced if the amount of violence a child watches is condensed. Repeating the second part and going on now. The main cause of road rage is a sense of uncontrollable anger or violence in the driver. Many times this violence has been present in the person since childhood. Much of this violence can be traced back to acts of violence seen on television as a child. It is hard to believe, but road rage and television violence may have similarities. The violence on television is capable of persuading a variety of people to doing unthinkable things. For this reason, the government should require all new television sets to include the V-chip. The V-chip is an electronic means of screening out content, particularly violence, that the parents deem inappropriate for their children's viewing. If this law is passed, it could significantly reduce the number of road rage incidents in this country because people would not be as prone to committing violent acts. They would think twice about acting on their anger because they would not have violent thoughts instilled by television in their minds. Road rage will be reduced if the amount of violence a child watches is condensed. Road rage is a broad term and can include excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. It is defined as threatening or sometimes violent behavior that is intentionally inflicted on one or more motorists. Road rage is an increasing problem in the United States. Researchers say that the highway fatality rate due to driver aggression has increased little by little, which is enough to establish a clear trend that costs the nation billions of dollars. Road rage causes many different threats and harms. Drivers behind the wheel are at the risk of being affected by living with the threat of an aggressive driver every time they get behind the wheel. The most dangerous combination is when one instigates and one retaliates, in some cases using guns, knives, or their cars to settle a dispute. Under the right circumstances, anybody can become involved in road rage. Okay, there was a particularly tricky sentence there with a series of items. We're going to repeat this sentence a couple times, okay? So the series is excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. That's a mouthful. Did you get it? Okay, one more time. We're going to do the whole sentence this time. Road rage is a broad term and can include excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. Once more. Road rage is a broad term and can include excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. It is defined as threatening or sometimes violent behavior. Okay, now we're going to repeat this whole segment that I just read. Road rage is a broad term and can include excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. It is defined as threatening or sometimes violent behavior that is intentionally inflicted on one or more motorists. Road rage is an increasing problem in the United States. Researchers say that the highway fatality rate due to driver aggression has increased little by little, which is enough to establish a clear trend that costs the nation billions of dollars. Road rage causes many different threats and harms. Drivers behind the wheel are at the risk of being greatly affected by living with the threat of an aggressive driver every time they get behind the wheel. The most dangerous combination is when one instigates and one retaliates, in some cases using guns, knives, or their cars to settle a dispute. Under the right circumstances, anybody can become involved in road rage. For example, A famous actor was at a red light, got out of his car, and with a golf club smashed the windshield of the car in front of him that had cut him off earlier. In another situation, a stressed out church deacon fired a crossbow through the window of a car, killing the man who cut him off. Road rage can inflict serious physical harm on its victims and even death. Of the highway deaths last year, over half of them were related to aggressive driving. Automobiles are being used as weapons to inflict pain and suffering on people for reasons such as not using their blinkers or getting in the way of an angry driver. There are many reasons that lead people into rage on the road. One of the main causes is competition between drivers as they get on the freeway. These drivers see themselves as getting into a race or competition with the other drivers around them. These drivers see winners and losers on the road as they try to pass by or not let others in front of them. Sounds like the roadrunner and the coyote, doesn't it? A person's mood or feelings while they drive affects what they do. If a person is angry when they get in a car, they are not going to be nice to the people on the road. One doctor states that the brain is structured so that our mood influences how we see things and react to them. Road rage is also caused by the increased traffic congestion. Nearly all of the urban freeways are congested. There are too many cars on the road for the amount of roadways built. This accounts for the amount of traffic and the amount of cars slowing down. When people spend a lot of money on a car guaranteed to travel from 0 to 60 miles per hour in mere seconds, they tend to become enraged when it takes a long time to travel one block. If a driver's expectations are not met, then an outbreak of anger will occur. Frustration and aggression often grow when a trip takes longer than it should because of things like traffic congestion. Just as the traffic is being congested, the anger in the driver is awakening. Once the driver is out of the gridlock, they often blow off their built-up anger and frustration by driving aggressively to make up lost time, causing road rage. There are a few ways to avoid acts of road rage. When you merge, avoid cutting a person off by giving plenty of room and using your blinker. Okay, we're going to do this whole thing again, and it's going to be at about 160, 170 in that area. Okay? All the way through. Here we go. I walk to my car because work is finally over. It's late, and I'm ready to go home. I start the engine, turn on the radio, and take a deep breath. This will be a long drive home. As I was getting on the freeway, I realized it would be an even longer drive home than I expected. Apparently, I cut someone off because I was honked at several times. I was afraid because this person tailgated me until I was almost home. In this case of road rage, I was lucky. I wasn't hurt and my car was not damaged. Other people have not been so lucky. Every time someone gets into a car and ventures onto city streets, they run the risk of encountering road rage. Sometimes they will become the victim of senseless acts of violence, and sometimes they will be the aggressor. Every 13 minutes, one person dies in a motor vehicle crash. The main cause of road rage is a sense of uncontrollable anger or violence in the driver. Many times this violence has been present in the person since childhood. Much of this violence can be traced back to acts of violence seen on television as a child. It is hard to believe, but road rage and television violence have many similarities. The violence on television is capable of persuading a variety of people to do unthinkable things. For this reason, the government should require all new television sets to include the V-chip. The V-chip is an electronic means of screening out content, particularly violence, that the parents deem inappropriate for their children's viewing. If this law is passed, it could significantly reduce the number of road rage incidents in this country because people would not be as prone to committing violent acts. They would think twice about acting on their anger because they would not have violent thoughts instilled by television in their minds. Road rage will be reduced if the amount of violence a child watches is condensed. Road rage is a broad term and can include excessive speed, reckless lane switching, tailgating, running stoplights and signs, passing on the right, honking horns, flashing lights, and screaming and making obscene gestures. It is defined as threatening or sometimes violent behavior that is intentionally inflicted on one or more motorists. Road rage is an increasing problem in the United States. Researchers say that the highway fatality rate due to driver aggression has increased little by little, which is enough to establish a clear trend that costs the nation billions of dollars. Road rage causes many different threats and harms. Drivers behind the wheel are at the risk of being greatly affected by living with the threat of an aggressive driver every time they get behind the wheel. The most dangerous combination is when one instigates and one retaliates, in some cases using guns, knives, or their cars to settle a dispute. Under the right circumstances, anybody can become involved in road rage. For example, a famous actor was at a red light, got out of his car, and with a golf club smashed the windshield of the car in front of him that had cut him off earlier. In another situation, a stressed-out church deacon fired a crossbow through the window of a car, killing the man who cut him off. Road rage can inflict serious physical harm on its victims and even death. Of the highway deaths last year, over half of them were related to aggressive driving. Automobiles are being used as weapons to inflict pain and suffering on people for reasons such as not using their blinkers or getting in the way of an angry driver. There are many reasons that lead people into road rage on the road. One of the main causes is competition between drivers as they get on the freeway. These drivers see themselves as getting into a race or competition with the other drivers around them. These drivers see winners and losers on the road as they try to pass or not let others in front of them. Sounds like the road runner and the coyote, doesn't it? A person's mood or feelings while they drive affects what they do. If a person is angry when they get into a car, they are not going to be nice to the people on the road. One doctor states that the brain is structured so that our mood influences how we see things and react to them. Road rage is also caused by the increased traffic congestion. Nearly all of the urban freeways are congested. There are too many cars on the road for the amount of roadways built. This accounts for the amount of traffic and the amount of cars slowing down. When people spend a lot of money on a car guaranteed to travel from 0 to 60 miles per hour in mere seconds, they tend to become enraged when it becomes a long time to travel one block. If a driver's expectations are not met, then an outbreak of anger will occur. Frustration and aggression often grow when a trip takes longer than it should because of things like traffic congestion. Just as the traffic is being congested, the anger in the driver is awakening. Once the driver is out of the gridlock, they often blow off their built-up anger and frustration by driving aggressively to make up for lost time, causing road rage. There are a few ways to avoid acts of road rage. When you merge, avoid cutting a person off by giving plenty of room and using your blinker. Okay, so that was about 5.5 minutes at 160 to 170. Sounds like it's dense. That was kind of hard to read even. Okay, we're going to do a jury charge now and keep it at speed. Okay. And some preview words, not necessarily that you would have briefs for these or anything, but they're going to come out in the dictation. Executrix, wide-bodied, 3-engine, wing down, Noel S. Armin, American Airlines. Here's a word I don't know how to pronounce, and it is spelled A-I-L-E-R-O-N. It's not a proper noun. Probably has something to do with aircraft Equipment, we'll find out, I guess. Abraham J. Armin, Los Angeles, flight recorder, wings level, I'm going to pronounce that aileron. Aileron is what I will say. O'Hare International Airport, McDonnell Douglas Corporation, National Transportation Safety Board. On the record. Gentlemen of the jury, this is a lawsuit brought by the plaintiff, Noel S. Armin, as executrix of the estate of Abraham J. Armin, deceased, versus McDonnell Douglas Corporation and American Airlines, Inc. This case has come to this court when the crash of a DC-10 plane on an American Airlines flight at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago lost an engine during takeoff. This occurrence took place on May 25, 1989. The plane was a wide-bodied, three-engine DC-10 manufactured by McDonnell Douglas and operated by American Airlines. The plaintiff asks for damages for conscious pain and suffering of the decedent prior to his death. The plaintiff asks for the loss of services and for the loss of financial support. The facts are as follows. The decedent was seated on the right side of the DC-10. The court has noted that a passenger on the right side would not normally be able to note the absence of an engine on the left side. The total flight lasted 31 seconds from the takeoff until the crash. The evidence in this case refers to that part of the report of the National Transportation Safety Board, which is based on the data from the plane's flight recorder. This evidence presented in this case shows that the plane was able to take off smoothly despite the loss of its left engine, climbing to the 325 feet level. Double check what I'm doing here. Okay. I'm going to go back, repeat it, and go on. Gentlemen of the jury, this is a lawsuit brought by the plaintiff Noel S. Armin as executrix of the estate of Abraham J. Armin, deceased, versus McDonnell Douglas Corporation and American Airlines. This case has come to this court when the crash of a DC-10 plane on an American Airlines flight at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago lost an engine during takeoff. This occurrence took place on May 25, 1989. The plane was a wide-bodied, three-engine DC-10 manufactured by McDonnell Douglas and operated by American Airlines. The plaintiff asks for damages for conscious pain and suffering of the decedent prior to his death. The plaintiff asks for the loss of services and for the loss of financial support. The facts are as follows. The decedent was seated on the right side of the DC-10. The court has noted that a passenger on the right side would not normally be able to note the absence of an engine on the left side. The total flight lasted 31 seconds from the takeoff until the crash. The evidence in this case refers to that part of the report of the National Transportation Safety Board, which is based on the data from the plane's flight recorder. This evidence presented in this case shows that the plane was able to take off smoothly despite the loss of the left engine, climbing to 325 feet. The aircraft lifted off in a slight left wing down attitude. This condition was corrected by the application of a right wing down aileron and right rudder, stabilizing the plane at a wings level stance, and the plane continued to climb. At about 11 seconds before the impact, the plane began to roll slightly to the left. It was not until 3 seconds before the impact that the plane reached a 90-degree position, and it then crashed. At the time of the crash, the decedent was 30 years old and employed as a buyer for a retail office supply business in Los Angeles, California. His 1989 salary is $36,000 a year. His employer testified that his 1990 salary probably would have been $56,000, including a bonus, but that it was impossible to estimate his future income from the company. The plaintiff, mother of the decedent, is a 66-year-old widow, a nurse with a life expectancy of 14.8 years at the time of her son's death. The plaintiff had received $160,000 in life insurance payments on her husband's death and returned to work. She earned approximately $24,000 to $28,000 in 1988 and $24,000 in 1989. Prior to his death, her son, in 1989, had assigned to her monthly payments of $192 due under an annuity inherited from his father, which expired in 1989. The son is proven to have been quite devoted to his mother, making some small gifts to her from time to time, encouraging her to make her residence with him rather than move into a senior retirement center. He also accepted the responsibility for any type of repair work around her present residence. As a judge, I will not admit the testimony of any economic experts called by the plaintiff to testify as to her projections in regard to the decedent's future gifts to her. This would be based solely on assumption as to economic trends, future tax rates, and any disposable income from decedent. Okay, I'm going to read a few 1-minute segments out of that now. I'll pause in between. This will be more of a push on the record. The plaintiff asks for damages for conscious pain and suffering of the decedent prior to his death. The plaintiff asks for the loss of services and for the loss of financial support. The facts are as follows. The decedent was seated on the right side of the DC-10. The court has noted that a passenger on the right side would not normally be able to note the absence of an engine on the left side. The total flight lasted 31 seconds from the takeoff until the crash. The evidence in this case refers to that part of the report of the National Transportation Safety Board, which is based on the data from the plane's flight recorder. This evidence presented in this case shows that the plane was able to take off smoothly despite the loss of the left engine climbing to 325 feet. The aircraft lifted off in a slight left wing down attitude. This condition was corrected by application of a right wing down aileron and right rudder stabilizing the plane at a wings level stance, and the plane continued to climb. At about 11 seconds before the impact, the plane began to roll slightly to the left. It was not until 3 seconds before the impact that the plane reached a 90-degree position and it then crashed. Okay, one more. At the time of the crash, decedent was 30 years old and employed as a buyer for a retail office supply business in Los Angeles, California. His 1989 salary is $36,000 a year. His employer testified that his 1990 salary would probably have been $56,000, including a bonus, but that is impossible to estimate his future income from the company. The plaintiff, mother of the decedent, is a 66-year-old widow, a nurse with a life expectancy of 14.8 years at the time of her son's death. The plaintiff had received $160,000 in life insurance payments on her husband's death and returned to work. She earned approximately $24,000 to $28,000 in 1988 and $24,000 in 1989. Last segment. She earned approximately $24,000 to $28,000 in 1988 and $24,000 in 1989. Prior to his death, her son in 1989 had assigned to her monthly payments of $192 due under an annuity inherited from his father, which expired in 1989. The son is proven to have been quite devoted to his mother, making some small gifts to her from time to time, encouraging her to make her residence with him rather than move into a senior retirement center. He also accepted the responsibility for any type of repair work around her present residence. As a judge, I will not admit the testimony of any economic experts called by the plaintiff to testify as to her projections in regard to the decedent's future gifts to her. This would be based solely on assumption as to economic trends, future tax rates, and any disposable income from decedent. Okay, I'm not going to pause the recording or end it for the link, because this is the end of our practice for this morning. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start takes now, but I just wanted to define that word I stumbled over is aileron, A-I-L-E-R-O-N, aileron, and it's the part of an airplane wing that can be moved up or down to cause the airplane to turn. So there's a word for the day. Probably never hear it again. But then again, when you do, you'll know what it means. Okay, this is week 1 Friday, and it is a 160 jury charge. It's our only 160 today, and there are no preview words on the record. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, it is now my duty as the court to instruct you in the law that applies to this case. It is your duty to follow the law as I give it to you, and you must determine the effect and value of the evidence and decide all questions of fact. You must perform all of these functions without being influenced by sympathy, prejudice, or passion. Defamation is the deliberate and willful damaging of a person's character resulting from libel or slander. In this case, the plaintiff seeks to recover damages for defamation resulting from libel. Libel is a false publication made in written form which exposes any person to hatred or disgrace, or which causes such party to be avoided, or which has a tendency to injure such a party in its occupation. Slander is a false publication made orally, either in person or by radio or television, or by any other means which by natural consequence causes actual damages. The nature of a false publication must be determined by the natural and probable effect of the publication on the mind of the average reader or listener. Consequently, if the average reader or listener would regard it as a defamatory publication, it may be libel or slander on its face, even though it is also capable of innocent meaning. Libel or slander is not published within the meaning of the law if the author of the statement makes the statement only to the plaintiff. If you find that the defendant defamed the plaintiff by a libel and slander, and that such libel and slander was a legal cause of general damages to the plaintiff, then in determining the amount of such general damages, you should consider several factors. You should consider the extent of the publicity given by the defendant to the libel and slander. You should consider the plaintiff's good name and reputation and the loss thereof, as well as the plaintiff's shame and mutual suffering. You should consider the plaintiff's prominence in the community where she lives and her professional or business standing within the community where she does business. In determining the amount of damages, the law does not establish any absolute rule or standard by which to compute such damage. Therefore, you may exercise your discretion, but must do so without passion or prejudice for or against either party. Furthermore, such damages shall not be enhanced by a repetition of such libel and slander by third persons who are not parties to this action, unless such repetition was authorized or intended or could have been reasonably foreseen. You must decide all questions of fact in this case from the evidence received in this trial and not from any other source. You must not make any independent investigation of the facts or the law, or consider or discuss facts as to which there is no evidence. Statements of counsel are not evidence. However, if counsel have stipulated to a fact, you must treat that fact as having been conclusively proved. You may not speculate as to the answers to questions to which objections were sustained or as to the reasons for the objections. You may not consider any evidence that was stricken. Such information must be treated as though you had never known of it. A suggestion in a question is not evidence unless it is adopted by the answer. A question cannot stand on its own as evidence. You may consider it only to the extent that it is adopted by the answer. The plaintiff has the burden of proving a preponderance of the evidence, all of the facts necessary to establish that the defendant made statements over television and in certain newspapers concerning her alleged criminal behavior. She must prove to you that such statements constituted libel and slander within the law which I have given to you. The preponderance of the evidence means evidence that has more convincing force than that opposed to it. You may find that the evidence is so evenly balanced that you are unable to say that the evidence on either side of an issue preponderates.